It is 12 minutes past 10 o'clock here on this Wednesday morning, and I warned you that I was going to get him back sometime soon, and Tony Rubo from Briggs Subaru of Topeka is back this week to talk a little cars. So let's talk a little bit cars. We were talking last week about the inventory issue that cars are having because of the lack of processing chips that are coming out of China and other places that supply them. And not just for cars, but for everything. And so because of that, new car manufacturers are unable to make the kind of cars that the level in terms of the numbers that they normally do. Last week you mentioned that you had, I think, 6 new cars on your lot, where usually it's in the 3 or 4 dozen range. Are you around the same area this week?
Yep. Yeah. Basically what we're doing is selling cars that are inbound cars now. And people are willing to wait. It's kind of going back to the old days almost, where you ordered your car and came and get it. But fortunately, we can project cars that are coming in, being built. So people are putting their names on those cars and patiently waiting for them to arrive.
Right. Well, and we definitely are having a commodity issue as far as, prices starting to go up on things and so on. But that's got to also be causing the same sort of thing to happen with the demand on used cars.
Exactly, especially when it's involving your trade-in. Your trade-in's going up too. So the nice thing about that is you're not overpaying per se, because, to be honest, we're overpaying for yours too. So it's still working out to where people can get cars. The issue is the used car market shrinking. So fortunately, I work for a company that says we're going to get out there and we're going to get cars. We're going to buy them. We're going to find them. We're going to go to auctions wherever we can and keep supplying the lots with cars so people have a choice to still get a car and still get a great price and get an amazing price on theirs.
So for the average person that, say, is coming into Briggs Subaru in Topeka, and they have a car and they're thinking about upgrading or something like that, what would you say to them in terms of, how things are different now than they were, say, 3 months ago?
Well, a lot of things have changed from 3 months ago. And that's what we have more people in the used car market buying cars now. So when you have a shorter supply and a higher demand, of course, prices go up. As I was telling you earlier, we now have rental car companies at auctions buying cars. The rental car companies sold off all their cars during the pandemic because they weren't renting them. Now it's opening back up, and the rental car companies have no cars. So what do? They go to the auction, they join up next to us, and they're bidding. Well, keep in mind, when a bidder has to have a car, they're willing to pay more, because they got to have cars to rent, period. So the prices go up.
Right, and they can't buy the new ones because they're not making them.
That's correct. There's no chips.
Yeah.
So they got to have used cars to rent. So they're participating in driving that market up. The good news for the customer is they're driving the market up on yours. That's the beautiful thing is your trade-in's worth a lot more money than it was 3 months ago. So if you were in a position, maybe you were even, maybe you're a little upside down, you might rethink your position and come back in and let us look at it, because your position's much better than it was 3 months ago.
Yeah. Well, and so then, of course, the question becomes, if somebody has a, because I remember over the years, whether it was, when my dad would need a new car or whatever, he tended to go and, buy cars and then sell his old car himself, because it used to be that it was really, you would get a lot better price if you would sell your own car. Usually in those days you would have to get an ad in the newspaper and pay a little bit of something for it and so on. But you'd get people coming around, and usually you could actually assume that if they gave you a check, there was actually money behind it and stuff like that. Yes. But at any rate, in those days you could get more by selling it privately than you were going to get in a trade-in. It would seem to me like this pressure that there is on dealerships to have inventory is going to make them a lot more interested in making sure they get your trade, such that it may be more advantageous for a person to go ahead and trade a car in as opposed to trying to sell it themselves.
1,000%. We are aggressively handling the trade-ins, and right now we're doing trade-up, trade-in, or trade-in, trade-up, excuse me. Simply for that matter, now is the time to trade your car in. Don't wait another month. The inventories are shrinking. The inventories now are decent. Used car inventories are decent. you need to get it done now.
All right, so that's I mean that would make sense that that at this point you're probably just as well, and like you mentioned that you know, somebody who had a car, a lot of the things with cars that can be really dependent upon how long you like to keep them. For example, you know, there's some people that like to have a car every year or two or whatever. Some people keep their car until they drive into the ground, and then you have your average person that keeps it 4 or 5 years or something like that. And you know, nowadays when we have these really long-term financing that comes when you buy whether it was a new car or even a used car through a bank or something like that, people are having 4, 5, 6 year loans on cars. They still oftentimes owe money on cars that are 4 or 5 years old. Sometimes those cars are, you know, still are, like you said, you're upside down. You have the value of the car is less than you owe on that car. But in this climate, that's probably less likely to be the case.
100%.
Which means that when you go to trade it in and get a new car, you're not having to finance the old financing again.
Correct. Yeah, you're not taking you're not overloading your loan with more debt.
Right. And so, because again, that's the what you want in a best case scenario is to not owe more on the car than you could get by selling it. And that's always with new cars. That's all. I mean, they always, the old adage, you drive the car off a lot, it's worth half of what it was. You know, so you're always going to be a little upside down in a brand new car at the very, very beginning of it. Right. But again, this is the time where that's the least true.
I've been doing this for 42 years. This is the time where it's the least truth. Yes.
Now, the flip side of that is, and I know that a lot of this has changed a lot. Again, 42 years ago, when somebody came in to lease a car, they were part of some company, a corporation that was, not wanting to own the car. They were wanting to basically have a strange rental of the car for a certain period of time, pay you a specific amount every month that they could write off on their taxes as car expenses and so on and so on. Leases don't work anything like that anymore. Leases are actually just kind of an alternative form of financing compared to a normal car purchase.
Yes, you're correct. The way I explain it is it's just a different mathematical proposal for you to consider before you make your decision about how to pay for your car.
Because I know a lot of people, when they hear lease, that's the first thing they think is that they don't own the car. And that's not exactly true. It's just different. It's more along the lines of you're buying a car with an agreement for someone to buy it back at a certain period of time in the future.
Well, yeah, to me, that's one of the big advantages is you have an actual partner that will guarantee the value. When you finance your car for 72 months, a lot of people still say, well, at least I own it. Well, you technically don't own it. If you miss 2 or 3 payments, the ownership pops up really quick. So you really have a partner when you finance a car, whether it be through Subaru Financial or Toyota Financial, or you have a lease company that you're handling the lease through, could be the same. Normally they're driven by, Subaru Financial or Toyota Financial. So you have a partner either way, whether you finance or you lease, you have a partner. In the lease, you have a partner that says, under the agreement, under these miles that you predicted that you're going to drive, I will guarantee you this much for the car. If you decide you don't want it anymore for whatever reason, that's pretty big.
Yeah, like you said, it's essentially a guarantee end of term that after a certain period of time, and this is all things that individual buyers can decide. You don't have to. I mean, it's not one size fits all for every lease now. You're very flexible on the various things that can be done in a lease in terms of the number of miles you say you're going to drive the car, how, the term of the lease, whether it's going to be a year or 2 years or, 3 years, whatever. All of that's very flexible, and people can suit it to whatever it is they expect to do. Because that was another thing that people used to believe about leases is that, if you're going to have a lease, you better only drive that car to the grocery store 3 times a week and that's it, or you're going to go over your mileage and then your car won't be worth anything. Well, it doesn't really work like that anymore.
No, it doesn't. Not even close. There was a guy named Ralph Nader way back in the day, and he looked at the leases we were doing 42 years ago. He said, hey, time out. These are really not consumer friendly. And all that changed with Ralph Nader. And today it's all in black and white. It's very simple. And you can build to your driving habits, you can build your own lease. So you're not, because I heard horror stories like, well, we couldn't go to Disneyland this year because we had too many miles on our van. Well, no, let's build it the right way so you know that you're going to have miles. And when you have your drop-off time, it's either going to be drop-off, you're either going to have equity. If you don't have equity, if you have negative equity is not yours.
So, and by the way, it's also not nearly as easy to reach underneath and unscrew the speedometer as it used to be.
You can't do that anymore, Joel.
It's a lot. But anyway, not that anyone would have ever done that in the past, of course. Anyway, but no. So who is Elise gonna? Because again, for the longest time, the only people that really benefited from leases were mostly people that were doing business driving, or people that drove their car very little, where you didn't get a whole lot of mileage. Under the current situation, under the current plans, the way cars work, who does a lease really benefit the most?
Several people. All situations are different. So you just take a look at that. Back in the day, people leased cars because we used to put covers over them and the new body style came out. The new Subaru's out. I want it, and I'm just going to lease it. Now, people aren't leasing because of body styles. Today's people are leasing because they want to keep up with technology. That's why they're leasing. Is I want the latest. I want the most safety. I want the best radio system. I know that sounds crazy.
No, it makes a big difference.
It's what people want today.
Yeah. And so for people that like to replace their cars every couple of years, leases are definitely a definite good option.
Well, yeah. When you think about the principle of it is I'm going to go ahead and put you in this car and I'm going to guarantee you what it's worth. Really? Yeah, in writing. Okay, and that's from the manufacturer. It's not, it's Subaru says, we'll buy it back at this price, guaranteed.
And so what about people that are a more higher mileage type drivers? If it's someone who commutes, like let's say you're like me and you commute from, Topeka to Lawrence or from Kansas City to Lawrence. And so, you put a pretty good amount of miles on the car. Is there still an advantage to do a lease?
Actually, I believe you should be leasing if you're driving high miles. The reason why is it's hard to put a number on depreciation. The worst thing you can do to a car is put too many miles on it. Because when we sell it used, the first thing the customer asks is, can I see a Carfax and how many miles are on it? No, too many miles. No, thank you.
Right.
So mileage depreciates a car worse than anything. So if you can build a mileage lease and know at the end you fix your expense for that, right up front, you know what it costs to drive too many miles today. And
it's funny because it's in reality, someone who drives a lot of easy miles, like say, for example, in my case, I take the turnpike here more often than not. And so, it's a 40-mile drive. And so I'm putting 80 miles on the car every day, but they're easy miles. They're going right down the highway. There's no traffic that I usually have to worry about. And probably 95% of the drive is on the highway. Now, you compare that to someone who drives even 20 minutes to work, but the entire time they're going down I-35 in stop-and-go traffic because it's 7:30 and it's a height of rush hour. You're probably doing more damage to that car, to the engine and whatnot, than I am, going 40 miles a day.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, we got new technology where your engine shuts off and stops now.
Sure.
And it runs on an electric motor, and then it shifts back. So
yeah, there's
the technologies address that problem as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But my point was that just looking at a mileage number doesn't necessarily tell you, whether a used car is a good idea or not. There's really no way to know without knowing how it was driven.
No, not at all. But, I just think my biggest thing is I encourage customers. My job's not to sell you on the idea of a lease. My job is to inform you on how a lease works versus how you pay for your car. Now, whatever makes sense to you, we're happy to do.
Is there still a tax advantage for business owners to do it on a lease as well, because you can write off the lease payments?
There can be. You just have to talk to an accountant about that because everyone's situation is different. When you do a lease, just a normal lease as a consumer, there's tax savings immediately because you only pay tax on the monthly payment. Whereas if you buy the car and traditionally finance it for 60 months or whatever, you pay all the tax to the state of Kansas that day.
Well, yeah, that is a big chunk. It's usually in the thousands, and a lot of people end up putting it as part of their financing too, which
Correct.
Then they're paying interest on taxes and so on and so forth.
You hit the nail right on the head, Joel.
So, all right, well, Tony Rubo from Briggs Subaru of Topeka. And we're going to chat with you on Wednesdays for the next couple of weeks after this. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, great. Come in to the trade-in, trade-up event as soon as you